I want to thank you for coming on Struggle to Success podcast. It is truly an honor and a privilege to have you. And if you could just tell me about hope+door.
So hope+door is in a nutshell is a national nonprofit that while our office is based right outside of Philadelphia, we are providing rent assistance in all 50 states to families who have hit a little unfortunate bump in the road, a little
Right.
kerfuffle in life. We will help them right the ship by paying their rent for up to 2 months, so that they can then go and be successful moving forward. So our sweet spot are families where they've experienced a medical emergency or ongoing medical challenge that has put one wage earner or multiple wage earners in the family in a position where they have to take some time away from work, car accident, somebody's had a job loss that's really no fault of their own. They've lost their job because their company decided to close or they merged with
Right.
somebody else.
Right.
So things like that are the places we like to say these are the unexpected, no fault emergencies that could happen to anybody, but they're happening at a time when families are probably at a lower wage earning time because their kids are little and they might be a little
Right.
like a lot of our
Right.
applicants are in their 30s and early 40s. I always say I just turned 60, so I always say it'd be
Mhm.
way easier financially to have kids now than when I did 30
Right.
years
Right.
ago,
Exactly.
because I make way more money now than I did 30 years ago when I had my oldest.
Right.
But we know that people are making it work, and then something happens, and I like to say we're like the Indianapolis 500 pit crew, right? You got a flat tire, you pull into the pit,
You
we put
pull
the help
in.
you put
Right.
the tire back
Exactly.
on, and we get you ready, and we send you
Exactly.
back out to finish to help finish the race. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing. So we were founded in June of 2021, so the organization's only 4 years old. We've already
Okay.
done just over $500,000 in rent grants to about
That is
175
phenomenal.
families,
That is phenomenal.
and that's what we're doing. So that's who we are in a nutshell. What we do.
Since you're coming into this company, has that mission changed over the years, or is it modified due to the needs of, as you say, individuals who are going through a loss or an unexpected bill or something like that? Do you see anything of that mission changing?
So one of the things I think the core mission, which is to help families avoid homelessness, right? Because one of the challenges if you have an eviction, if you get evicted from your apartment, not only
Mhm.
that moment where you have no place to live, right? But it
Right.
becomes much more difficult for you to rent again because there are a number in many states. You
Yes. Yes.
landlords can just decline you as a future
Yep.
resident because you have an
Mhm.
eviction, sort of in your they'll do a credit check and they'll see
Right.
that there's an
Right.
eviction there, and then they won't rent to you. And so you don't want to saddle somebody with that sort of black mark on their credit history,
Right.
because it makes it hard for them, and if you don't have stable housing, right, it makes it hard to go to work and everything else. And I think our
Mhm.
focus is on families with school age kids, because the
Mhm.
impact to the kids is not only in the immediate moment where they might have to change schools, they lose their friend group, and all of the emotional and psychological supports that come from living in a neighborhood, right, with people that you know. Um, but for many of these kids, when they change schools mid-year, they lose at least 3 months of educational advancement. And the likelihood and this is, I think, the statistic that gets me the most, a child who experiences eviction as a kid is 70% more likely to be evicted as an adult, right? And so, this is about changing like the trajectory
Wow.
for the next generation, right? So
Wow.
so I think the core mission is always going to be the core mission. I think one of
Mhm.
the things that we've really tried to do over the last year is to not be a dead end for people in terms of information, right? So a lot of people
Mhm.
apply to us, they don't qualify they haven't lived in their apartment long enough, they don't have
Right.
kids, okay? Like
Right.
they probably don't read the directions and just submit
Right.
an application
Right.
anyway, it happens.
So those are because you have to meet some form
Correct,
of
correct. We have
requirements
some
too. Okay.
eligibility requirements. They're not that many, but they're still
Right.
like many programs. But when we say no, it's no. It's we say we're not the right fit for you. However, we're going to arm
Mhm.
you with a customized list of resources for where you live to help you connect with other resources that would be able to help you in your neighborhood. And this drills down as deep as the church around the corner that might be able to provide
Mhm.
support to you, right? So
Mhm.
AI has made making those lists a ton easier because
Right. Right.
we've written some really good prompts, but we know how hard it is to navigate the alphabet soup of social service
Right. Mhm.
agencies and of government
Mhm.
agencies. And we just really try and simplify that process to say, hey, look, here's good people. Here's what it means to get case management. I mean, we've had people we've referred to labor lawyers because we can tell the situation that prompted them to lose their job was something that really probably requires a little legal intervention. We had
Mhm.
somebody who was inappropriately terminated from their job. They had a learning disability that had been
Mhm.
documented. Helped connect them with a labor lawyer. They just settled for $800,000 a couple of weeks
So
ago.
you don't let anyone go,
No,
and I love that.
no.
You don't let anyone go, and you and your team will take that family and give them the next assistance that they could use to utilize to get them back on their feet, and that's phenomenal. And you are so well rounded because you address the psychological effects, you address the scholastic effects, you address the nucleus of a family and then the repercussions of a family being evicted. All this come over the course of years of study, or did you just say, you know what, I need to well round myself in this because this is going to help me help others.
I think it's a combination. Like I've been doing this work a long time, probably over
Hmm.
30 years. And I
Hmm.
think that part of it is just the experience that you have talking to people. And I find people just in general really interesting. I get filled up from those interactions with other people. Some people find themselves depleted at the end of the day. I feel like I need to be with other people to like,
He's
fill
like,
up
I'm ready
that,
to go.
go into
Energize,
that, right? When
energize,
I gotta have
energize.
it, right? So I think that it's a combination. But look, part of it is look, you have your own experiences, right? My
Mhm.
husband, about 15 years ago, was diagnosed with a
Okay.
rare form of thyroid cancer in his
I'm
40s. It was
sorry.
highly
Okay.
unusual. He's fine, but you realize
Okay.
like how disruptive that was to our family, right?
Right.
We had all of the other things really taken care of, right? I
Right.
had time off I could
Right.
take from work, right? And it was still really hard, right? And you
Mhm.
realize you then when you recognize that other families are having that same sort of medical moment in their family, but they don't have the supports that we had. We call it you social capital, right? It's the friends
Mhm.
and the family members that you can lean on, not just for emotional support, but potentially for financial support.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
had that,
Mhm.
and then some. Like maybe we had a little too much family right around
Right.
that
Right.
time,
Right.
right?
Right.
But
Mhm.
other people don't have that, and so I think it's those kinds of experiences that you can't help but sit back and say, geez, this is really hard for our family. How much harder would it be when I can't even imagine like the added pressure if you now are taking unpaid time away from work and can't pay your rent, can't buy food, can't do the things, can't provide the stuff that your kids need. You're not there to drive them to school, right? Like all of that stuff that you do as a
But personally, just to emphasize that point, I created a checklist, and on my checklist, I said these are the things that I need to do. And when I couldn't do those things anymore, and I felt like reality, I couldn't take my youngest one to preschool because I needed to have gas to go to therapy.
that's the reality. And I
Right.
think that the years working in hunger relief, right, and helping get people food, you start to hear people's stories, and I make them my own, right? Like you can't, these are
Hmm.
really personal. And when we talk to people who are applicants in our program, we get to know them, we get to know their families. We can't help but be vested in what's going to
Right.
happen next.
Right.
We check in with people afterwards. And look, and I can't help myself. I sit on two boards of two other organizations right now, both of
Okay.
which are providing support and resources in the community. One around it's a youth media and health
Hmm.
education program that works primarily
Hmm.
in low-income school districts in Philly and Norristown,
Okay.
out in the Philly
Okay.
area. And the other is a free loan program. We provide interest-free, no-fee loans in the community. And
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
you're taking in people's stories from the community, and just when we think we've heard the craziest sort of set of circumstances that somebody is
No. No.
facing,
No.
the next person comes to the door with a whole other story that is just
Right.
turning the way we see the world and the way that we're recognizing how people are navigating and how hard it is. I mean, sometimes I think, geez, I feel like the person's like, it's like one of the old records, right? And it's stuck and the needle is
Right.
stuck. And it's
Right.
like they've had, three people have close to them have passed away during the last year. Their company got bought out. Their car died. I'm like, oh my God, did the floods come and the fire and everything else? Because like,
The
what else?
storms, everything,
Right,
the
everything
lightning.
going. And I'm like, geez, like this
Hmm.
family really needs a break. And if we can help be that piece that helps turn the
Hmm.
corner and
Hmm.
helps like make you see that like there's that next thing that's possible, then we're doing our job.
Since the 90s, you mentioned the 90s, and now, do you see more individuals in need of help? And I'm a double shot this. Do you see more individuals willing to ask for help?
So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think that so yes and no on both accounts, right? I think
Okay.
that there's been ebbs and flows, right? Like how the universal economy is, how the unemployment, what's the story with unemployment really
Hmm.
impacts sort of like what need looks like. I think
Hmm.
that the world is way more complicated now than it was in the 90s, right? How people
Okay.
get and share information. I think part of it is that people have access to information. They don't always use it as to their best and highest benefit. I don't think they don't always understand it. They use TikTok to, be their source
Right.
of education
Right.
and information, and it's not always accurate. And I think that sometimes you get this idea that you could be a what do you call it, an influencer, right, and make all this
Hmm.
money, and that's going to be the answer to your like to all
It's
your
not. No.
family
I.
problems. And
Not. No.
yeah, really, because there's a lot of
Right.
stuff on TikTok that's not making any money. I can
Right.
assure you,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so I think that there's also this feeling. I think asking for help on some levels is a little easier because you don't have to call anybody and talk to them,
Hmm.
right? You can do it
Hmm.
very, in some ways, anonymously because so much of it is happening electronically. So I think
Hmm.
asking for help can feel a little less like you're exposing yourself. In the 90s, you couldn't do
You
an
needed to be
internet
front line. You needed
search.
to be in line in person. As me being in law enforcement, and here's a person, and I feel as though I'm supposed to have. I'm supposed to be tight all the time. I'm supposed to have ready all the time, and being in that completing your application process, it was easy. I didn't feel threatened. I felt like I could do this and communicate with you and your team and get just a positive resolve. And I think that's important because, it doesn't matter what age or stage you're at, you have to have a process where people are invited to it.
So many of the people who reach out to hope+door have never been in a position before with the possible about 60% of our applicants have gone to college or are college educated, and they've probably applied for student loans, and that's the only help they've ever gotten, right? They don't, if you said to them, go apply for food stamps, they wouldn't have the first idea where you go to
Right.
do that, right? They're not
Right.
they're not ready to ask for help. I mean, I had one dad who did the application, and I think this was a devastating moment for him. He had a really hard time
Hmm.
accepting the sort of situation with their family, and said, I don't even know how to ask for help. And I said to him, look, the nice thing is that this is not a lifetime of support that you have to get. This is your
Right.
community being here for you. I mean, this is a guy we found out from the office that we're of his apartment complex, that
Hmm.
he's the guy who would help somebody change their flat tire, who would help people change their oil, his wife was always cooking if somebody had an emergency in their family, right? These are
Right.
like really giving
Right.
people. I said, this is your community giving back to you in a way, in a moment when you really need the help.
That's a
And
beautiful way of thinking of
and
it.
I said, and you
Yep.
can always pay it forward, right? You'll find a
Right.
way to pay this
Right.
forward. And it's not about
Yep.
the money. It's about just saying, you know what? I'm going to make myself available to somebody else when they need me, right? And just the same way that I need them right now. And so, um, he got over so,
Got over it.
over.
Okay.
Look, he felt like I'm the dad. I should be able to provide for my family. He
Hmm.
had been in the
Hmm.
military and had an honorable.
Hmm.
He got injured in the line of service to our country, and felt
Hmm.
like he was a hero in every way. And here
Right.
it was in
Yeah.
a moment that he couldn't provide for his family the way that he expected. The story is that he and his wife they had a 3-year old, and his wife was pregnant with their second kid. They had made all of the arrangements for his wife to be on 12 weeks of unpaid maternity leave, had put money away, right? They were ready. He was going to use his 2 weeks of PTO to be home when the baby was born. Everything's great.
Hmm.
During delivery, things went south very quickly, and
It
she
went
started
south.
hemorrhaging and almost died during delivery. They did an
Hmm.
emergency hysterectomy, but what it meant for Bobby, the dad, was that he needed to be home to be there for the
Right.
new
Right.
baby and
Right.
his wife and
Exactly.
everything. I said to him, who could have ever written this script, right? Like, you did
Nobody.
all of the things that you needed to do to be
Yep.
ready for this new baby, but there's a curveball here, and we're here
Yep.
to help you like smash this one over the fence, right? And I'm happy to say they're back. Everybody's back to work.
Good.
Their baby is fine and is about 3 months
Right.
old at this point, and they're now 4-year old. Jody, the mom, told me that she recently said that thing that made her realize that her family was now back to normal, which is that she said, "Send the baby back." Okay, she was like absolutely done without your sister, right?
Done. I'm done.
Right, but that's the moment when you
Great.
realize, like, you know what, my family's
Yeah.
back on track, right? We're doing our
Yeah.
thing, and we were really happy to be able to help them at that moment when
Mhm.
they really needed it most. And now they're back to doing their thing, living life to its fullest in Maryland, and being a great family. So,
What does the typical process look like when someone is reaching out for support from Hope and Door?
sure. So they go to our website, which is hopeanddoor.org. On the top right corner, they click apply, and
Mhm.
follow the bouncing ball online. We're actually just a little heads up. We're redoing our entire shifting to a different
Okay.
application process
Okay.
and company, which will make it even easier and friendlier, because we don't think our
Okay.
current sort of application is as friendly as it could be. You might think
Okay.
it's easy, but I would like it to be friendlier
Okay.
and easier to navigate. It is
Okay.
2025, so it should be easier to navigate.
Gotcha.
And we ask some basic questions like, name and address, and the name and contact information for your landlord. And then
Hmm.
we ask for a little bit for you to tell us what happened, why it is that
Hmm.
you're seeking rent support. We ask for some supporting documentation. You hit submit. The next thing that happens is we reach out to your landlord and ask for a copy of your lease and your ledger.
Okay.
The rent ledger, we always say the ledger doesn't lie. You can tell me you've been a really awesome tenant, and I can look at your ledger and see that
Okay.
you
So
are
let's be
many months.
transparent. Let's be honest.
Right. Let's be
Yes.
honest here.
Yes.
Like, sometimes
Hmm.
you're not as
Right.
you haven't had as clean living as you'd like to say. The ledger
Right.
reflects all that,
Right.
but we do look at the ledger. And then you have probably experienced yourself that we'll reach out if we need to have any clarifying
Hmm.
questions, right? If
Yep.
something that you said, we're like, can you give us a little more information? Do you have any documentation to support this? Once the staff, and just know that we look, when we start reviewing any new application, the expectation is that we're going to say yes. And then once the application is ready to go, and we'll decline any application that doesn't meet our eligibility requirements. Anytime that we think the application is ready for a yes, we send it off. We have an independent review committee, which is made up of people from the multifamily housing industry, some members of our board, who will do the final review of the application. Mostly they're there just as an extra check to make sure we didn't miss anything. If we've said yes, 99% of the time they also say yes. And they might ask for a little bit of clarifying questions. The whole process, assuming everybody responds to everything quickly, should take just about a week. Sometimes people are a little slow to respond, and the landlords are a little slow to respond. And on average, it takes us about 13 days. We are working really hard, and we're hopeful with our new application that it can expedite that. The cool thing that our new application will do is that it has the ability to what they call conditional logic, right? So if you answer a question one way, it'll ask you some follow-up questions, so we can get some of that information up front, which will then reduce the amount of time that we're chasing information from people. So it'll also automatically send an email to your landlord requesting the lease and ledger.
So if a person or family doesn't qualify for hope+door, what other assistance can you help them with? And how does that look?
Yeah, so what we'll do is part of the applications, we know where people live, right? And we'll often confirm, like, all right, you know, you say you live in, New Smyrna Beach in Florida, right? Like, you're just confirming that's where you are. Then we'll use things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and whatever. And we'll use one of those AI tools. We've written some really good prompts to help identify other resources in the community. We'll send you that customized list, and we'll also give you information. Like, if you were to call one of the social service agencies that does case management, like Salvation Army, United Way, Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Children's Service, right? Any of those organizations, like, what does that experience look like? Like, what could you expect when you call? We really want people to know. We talk to people about doing credit counseling, right, to get their financial house in order. And we have a network of nonprofit financial counseling groups that we work with. And we really encourage everybody that we can to at least have an initial conversation with them, because you'd be surprised at how easy it is to get a ton of help if you just have a little bit of information. And look, there's a lot of people whose lives, somebody in the family's life has been touched by cancer. There's a whole network of resources for families who could benefit from those kinds of programs. There's some really cool organizations out there that a lot of people don't know about. So we really try, and our information sort of describes what the organization or government agency actually does, phone number, email address, website, if we can, who to actually ask for to contact, right? We drill down as deeply as we can to really try and make that process helpful. Look, we often talk to people who will ask, are you active in your church or synagogue or mosque or other faith-based organization? Most people don't realize that their members of their clergy have discretionary funds that they make available to congregants. Most people have no idea that's a possibility. I said, when they're passing the collection plate around on Sunday, what do you think's happening with that money? Right? So, some of that money, the pastor has.
That's the community's money. That's the community's money.
And some of that's your own actual money, right? So,
exactly.
So we really try and say to people, there are places to get support that a lot of people just don't even really think about. And we really try and help people piece that all together. We had a call earlier this week from somebody who's a victim of domestic violence and really was in a safe place, but wasn't really sure what to do next. And we, were able to sort of direct her to contacts very local to her in Connecticut that would be able to provide her with the kind of help that she needs. So there's just we all have to work together.
Right.
We are
Right.
making relationships with social services. 211 is like it's
Hmm.
like the where to call. It's like the 911 of information for
Right.
social services.
Hmm.
Most of the time, it's run by United Way in most communities.
Okay.
Um, and there's statewide 211 and national 211 and local 211. It's all sort of managed in the same universe. But we're
Hmm.
making sure that Hope and Door is part of that resource community. But it's a place where we look and where we encourage people to look. Also, if you're an independent thinker, it is a good place to go to find out some stuff. But look, we do we tend to get applications in clumps. So we're very popular at the moment in Grain Valley, Missouri, which is right outside of
Okay.
St. Louis. I had to look it
Okay.
up. I did not know where Grain Valley, Missouri was. And I
Okay.
think, people tell their friends and community managers tell other community managers. And so the word is out in
Hmm.
Grain Valley, Missouri. That
Okay.
prompted us to do a little bit of deep dives into some of the other
Right.
social services in Great Valley so that we had a good understanding of what the social service landscape is there and could say, no, 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 like we heard that, this
Hmm.
particular organization is really helpful to people. And so
Hmm.
don't take what your neighbors are telling you. That's really not true. And
Exactly.
that we've had some
Exactly.
people who've had some great
So,
success.
how does Hope and Door um, measure success?
How do we
How,
measure
how do you?
So part of this is, I think the big measure point to us is what happens to people after they get a rent grant from us, right? Because you have to remember, we sit right in the crosshairs between the landlords and the tenants, right? I'm not picking
Right.
sides in this battle. No way,
Right.
no how.
Right.
Because remember, our rent grant money goes to the landlord to bring your rent balance back
Hmm.
to zero, right? So that's
Hmm.
always our goal, right? Is to right the ship for you. It's like
Right.
a really delicate ecosystem, right? Because if landlord gives you a place to live, they need to keep it in working order and make it nice. And in exchange, you need to pay your rent, right? And when
Correct.
one part of that ecosystem starts to fall apart, the whole thing
Hmm.
falls apart.
Falls apart.
So
Right.
we recognize that we're helping to keep the landlords whole so that they can continue to fix your refrigerator or repaint the lines in the parking lot or any of the million of
Right.
things that they
Right.
do, right?
Right.
So success for us and really for the industry is the person able to stay in their apartment. So we survey our residents about 9 months after they've received a rent grant. The average person stays in their apartment just under 2 years. So we're always saying like, okay, how'd we do? So we know that
Hmm.
90% of our grant recipients are either still living in their same apartment or have moved to a
Hmm.
larger apartment a year
Hmm.
after they've gotten their rent grant from us.
Hmm.
So
You,
that
you you mentioned really quick. The average person or family stays in their
apartment
apartment for
about
two
two
years.
years.
Why?
Why
Why
do they
is that?
move? Because they get another job. Because remember, when you think about who's living in rental housing, a lot of them are
Right.
people who are younger, right? And so this is
Hmm.
the average. I think when you look at, if you broke down all the averages, people who are older tend to stay in their
Hmm.
apartments longer because this is going to be potentially a permanent dwelling place for them, right? They're going to
Okay.
stay in that apartment until they're moving to, maybe an
Right.
underground,
Right.
living situation, right?
Exactly.
But people who are younger tend to be much more transient. They'll move more often.
Okay.
My kids are 29 and 30, right? And I think certainly my younger daughter has probably moved 6 times, 7 times. She moved just about
Okay.
every year since she graduated from college.
So she's
So
just trying to find her calling. She's
you know,
trying to find her
you know
spot.
what? She got a better deal on another apartment. She had some more
Yeah.
money, could move to a nicer place. This place
Yeah.
had parking, whatever it was. She wanted to be closer to work, whatever are the drivers. So that's
Mhm.
why. But I think that for us, 90% of our applicants are still living in their apartments. So for us,
Mhm.
that's a big measure of success for us because it means they haven't been evicted.
Right.
They haven't, their finances are stable, right? Like we did the thing we set out to do was to create
Right.
stability for the family to allow them to stay put. Now, some of the people who move, it's because they have more kids and they need a bigger
Right.
apartment, or
Right.
they're making some more money and they could be in a bigger space, right? Who doesn't want more closets? Like, I don't care how many closets you have, there's never enough of them, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
or you have a new job and you want to be closer to work, or you have an opportunity, maybe your kid is an awesome athlete and they're going to be in some, gymnastics program and you want to be
Right.
closer to the gym, right? There's a
Right.
million reasons
Right.
why people
Exactly.
move. But our goal here is to make sure that people are moving by choice, for something that's better or makes more sense for their family, not because they got evicted. I think it's about 7% of the people still end up moving because they were evicted. But
What are some of the biggest barriers families face in securing stable housing, and how do you navigate those things?
look, I think some of the big challenges have to do with our is cost, right? Like, housing is not cheap. Rental housing, I don't care where you are in the country, it is making up a bigger and bigger percentage of people's total household income. The goal is to keep your rent to be less than 30% or less of your household income. When you have kids who are in preschool, it is likely that your rent plus preschool is pushing over 50% of your household income just to solve childcare and housing, which is nuts to me, right? Like,
Right.
there's just not
Right.
that's not enough money left over to weather any storm or to save anything for a rainy day or for the future, right? That's bright and sunny, but just for the future
Right.
nonetheless. So I think the obstacle is part of its cost, part of its availability. I mean, there are some places where there's just not enough housing for all of the
Mhm.
people who need it, right? There's a lot of
Right.
competition. I think that there's a very cool company called One App. I
Hmm.
encourage everybody to watch. Tyrone Poole is the founder of the company. He has a very cool TED talk about his own experience with housing and why it is that he started this company. It's really to help reduce the cost of the application fees, because a lot of uh, properties will charge you $50 or more for every
Hmm.
application. And if you get declined for an apartment, now you got to find another $50 to apply
Yeah,
to
you got to
another
find out
place, right?
$50. Yeah.
So I think that these are all barriers. And look, and I think that people who are searching for quality schools for their kids, right? This
Hmm.
is limiting where
That's
maybe they're willing
huge.
to live or where they
That's
want to
huge.
live. And they're looking for the other resources, right, that make living somewhere livable.
Right.
And it's just, I look at what's happening in the area in Philadelphia. Look, they're building a lot of very expensive housing, right? They're high
Hmm.
end apartments that are going to go for premium dollars. That's not going to help people who are just starting
Right.
out, who are working. I mean, somebody does the jobs that everybody needs, right? Somebody is working in
Right.
retail, people are working in
Right.
restaurants, they're not making a ton of money. They also need
Right.
housing, and nobody wants to commute an hour from work, right? To go work at
Right.
the
Right.
local restaurant.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so finding that balance, I think these are all like really interesting challenges for people. The industry is mindful of that, right? There's still a for-profit business in the housing
Right.
side. But look, I think the other obstacle is that recent cuts in HUD funding is going to be really devastating for people who were counting on or are currently getting Section 8 housing vouchers, because that program is being decimated right now, which is, just another interesting hurdle and something that there'll be ripple effects, I think, throughout the housing universe there.
Is there? Yeah, you got me thinking, and it's not. So I don't want to throw this in there too hard on you, but is there a science to how we as consumers or renters should feel about apartment complexes or renters in general who increase their rent yearly? Or is there a sign?
Is
Should
there
we
a
be like,
sign?
okay, well, look,
I mean, look,
because you kind of, and I said that because you said, I think you have to say it again. You should 30% of your income,
yeah. You
but then
really,
if
I
the
think
rent
what
is
they look for is that you're not spending more than 30% of your income on
okay,
housing, right? And, a lot of landlords, if they're looking at your financials, right, can you afford to live here? If you're making $11 an hour. Nobody should be making $11 an hour who's listening to this. If you are, please go find another job. I don't care if the minimum wage is $7.25 in Pennsylvania, which is also ridiculous. However, go find another job, because there's plenty of jobs that are going to pay you $15 or $18 an hour. Like, seriously. If you need that, just call me. I can give you some. I'll give you some references as to where you should go.
I'm going to put all her information at the bottom of this episode, so don't worry.
Okay, do not take it. But if you were making, and I know that there are people who've applied to hope+door who I know are making $11 an hour. Right. You know,
that's heart-wrenching.
But here's the thing, like the cost of managing a property, right? Because remember, the landlord also has expenses, right? They're paying property taxes, which are going up. They're paying business taxes, which are going up. And the cost of the staff that works there increases, right? Everybody wants a little bit of a raise, right? Nobody's going to work for $11 an hour forever, right? Health insurance, the cost of providing health insurance for your staff goes up, right? Like, so all of the expenses that happen in business are happening for the landlord. And any service that they get, whether it's the lawn company, you want the grass cut in front of your building, somebody's got to do it, right?
Out the pot.
You want the fire suppression system to be checked out, so God forbid there's a fire, everybody gets out, right? All of those things, everybody's increasing those costs, so the money has to come from somewhere, right? Like, as I said before, this is a very delicate ecosystem, so I think sometimes the rents are going up because the cost of doing business is increasing, but there is certainly some conversation and where the cost of rents goes up based on what the market will bear, right? So, during COVID, you might remember a lot of the rents came down dramatically because nobody was like people were just not living there. They couldn't move. They couldn't get in new tenants, right? So the rents came down dramatically. And which is one of the reasons why both of my kids moved during COVID, was to have more space for less money than they were paying, right?
Get out.
But now, right, now you're back to a situation where there's scarcity, right? It's like anything else. If there's not that many of them, the price of it's going to go up. So there is definitely science and algorithms around how companies are setting rents and how they're using all of those inputs to determine what their rent increases are going to be. But I think about I sit a little bit outside of the multifamily housing industry, but when you think about all of the costs that go into stuff, the other cost that I really should say something about is the cost of eviction from the landlord side of this equation is very high. It costs on average in the United States almost $7,000 to evict somebody. And you're thinking, why, Amy? They've lost rent, right? The person hasn't paid their rent in a while, which is why they're getting evicted, right? So the landlord's probably not seeing any of that old rent. It costs money to do the court filings for the eviction. There's cost for what's called turning the apartment, right? What you're doing to get it ready for the next tenant. You might have to put a new carpet. You might have to paint. And then it takes, on average now, it takes almost 70 days to find a new tenant for an apartment. So you have almost 2 months of lost rent on the back end of this whole thing. So when you take that all together, on average in the country, it costs between, I think it's $3,500 and $12,000. So the average is about $7,000 to deal with an eviction. So we're there to try and help prevent that. So we're saving the industry. Our average rent grant is just under $3,000. So we're saving the industry a ton of money by working with us. Most people get
exactly. I didn't. Right? That's something.
So there's that equation, but when you just think about like the cost of this business is high, right? Look, your rent housing is probably the single most expensive thing that everybody does, like spends in the course of a month. So it would follow that the cost of providing that service is also high. It's expensive. This is not a cheap industry to be in. Right. I think there's a lot of risk involved for everybody, right? When you're a tenant
that is,
and you sign the lease,
valid.
You're entrusting that your community is going to provide your apartment. They're going to keep the hallways nice, like all of the things that you expect, right?
Right.
And your property assumes that everybody who lives there is going to pay their rent on time, right? Like this is part of the thing.
Right.
And like I said,
Right.
when one of those things gets out of balance, the whole house of cards falls apart. So, you know, should rents be going up? I think it depends on the market, right? Like I think
Okay.
that there are some places that they've kept rents pretty stable. They've gone up a little bit, and in a little bit in a way that's matched salary increases and whatever in the area. And other
Mhm.
places where the market is, you know, you look at places like New York City, San Francisco,
Right.
Center City,
Right.
Philadelphia, the rents are
Mhm.
I just sky high because the market can bear that and people are willing to pay it.
Yeah.
It does mean that it pushes some people out of the rental market, and you know,
Okay.
there's always a lot of conversation about where they end up
Right.
living and how far they're commuting
Right.
to work and things like that. So.
Does the community awareness play in preventing eviction before it becomes a crisis?
Right.
So as
So
a
I
community,
think that this is one of
and I
those.
know we kind of mentioned like word of mouth, like getting that
Yeah.
information out there.
So look, anything that people can do to let their friends and family and any person. I mean, if you're standing in line in the supermarket, please tell people that you heard this cool podcast and you learned about this program that can help people with their rent. Right? We're really
Thank
getting
you.
it out to everybody. Right? You should talk about
Mhm.
podcasts and tell everybody to listen
Right.
for
Right.
sure. And
Right.
and just say, hey, I learned about this cool thing and I want to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
sharing it with everybody.
Yeah.
Um, we are doing a lot of outreach to all of the
Mhm.
communities, certainly, you know, across the country, to the property management companies, to let them know that the service is out there and we're getting listed in as many places with as many social service agencies as we can. But I think that
Mhm.
the community awareness side for anybody, most people know that the wheels are getting a little shaky, right? And there's always
Right.
that moment, you know, when you get in your car and you're like, you know, something sounds funny. You're not really sure what it
Mhm.
is, and you try and push it out
Mhm.
of your mind because you cannot deal either from the expense or the time it's going to take to have your car in the shop, right? Or you
Right.
think, oh my God, do I have a flat tire? Right? You know how you like, they tell you to let your hands off the wheel for a second and see if the car's
Yeah.
going
Let's
the
see if
right
we
side.
shake. Yeah.
Okay, you try and really be paying attention to what's happening in your family. And if you
Right.
see the train wreck coming or a potential train wreck
Right.
coming,
Okay.
like reach out because look, we've had people who have said to us, I think I'm going to have a problem, let's say now with August rent, right? They might call us today and we'll say, okay, we're a little early, but that's okay. Send us the application and we're going to wait until August 1st to request your ledger because then you'll show that you're late and we'll help
Mhm.
you and we'll get all the ducks in a row so that we can be ready to provide support. We need to know that you're actually behind in your rent before we'll
Right.
provide rent support,
Right.
but we try to make sure you
Right.
don't get so far behind. The other thing is that I think this is the hard part is that for most people who are reaching out to us, like I said before, they're not used to asking for help, right? And
Yep.
sometimes what you need to know is you are in a moment in time that requires support from somebody else. You're not going to be able to muscle through. You can try, but sometimes the pile
Mhm.
just gets so deep you really can't get out from under it yourself. The earlier that you say, okay, might be heading south here, let me at least find out what my options are and get your resources, together so that if you decide you need to
Mhm.
tap into them, you can. Because they talk about early intervention for kids for
Mhm.
education, right? And the
Right.
benefits of speech therapy and early reading and all of this stuff for better education outcomes. The same is true of getting social service support, right?
Mhm.
The earlier in is way easier for all of us to help put you in the pit crew, get the wheels back on, and send you
Right.
out to the race, right? And that your downtime as a family becomes really limited. But look, emergencies happen. We had a woman, she was a grandmother who's raising her grandson. Her one of the parents was in jail, and the other was on the streets as a drug addict.
Mhm.
And she's raising her grandson. She dropped him off. She was waiting in the car, parked on the downtown Baltimore. He was at a music lesson, and next door was a jewelry store. A car pulls up in front of her, and four guys, masked men, get out with guns, and they did a smash and grab at the jewelry store that was next door. She thinks
Mhm.
she's being sneaky and is getting out her cell phone to take a picture. picture of the license plate of the car so she can report it to the police. One of the guys sees her. They drive the
Oh,
car around and they start smashing the car into her car, trying to kill her. Needless to say, other people heard the commotion, called the police. Those guys ultimately got arrested, but she sustained a broken shoulder and broken leg. Now, here she is, a grandmother raising her grandson, right? Trying to,
right.
and
Just
her
trying to help.
grandson said
Right.
to her, like, why did you do that? And she said, because this is our community and people can't do
Wow.
this in our community. And she was not sorry
Kudos for her.
that she
Kudos for
stood
her.
up, right, to
She's
do,
stepping up.
right, and to show her grandson.
Great.
But all of a sudden, she couldn't go to work for a period of time,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we were very happy to be able to help her and to help her
Mm-hmm.
family and to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that her grandson was connected with stuff like the Police Athletic League and other programs.
Mm-hmm.
I, and she had done a great job of connecting him with supportive services, but he was going into
Mm-hmm.
middle school, and I said to her, you remember from your own children, middle school is very, very hard for every parent on the planet, right?
Yes.
I said, let's
Yes.
make sure that you're like
Yes.
really prepared for this.
Yes.
But,
Yes.
look, crazy stuff happens to people. But
Mm-hmm.
she knew enough at that moment that she was going to have to get
Mm-hmm.
other support, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
she's just starts. I work in the phones, man. This is a woman who could work the phones. Like
Right.
anybody should
She
hire
could
her.
work the
It
phone.
was
She
amazing.
called.
Like she was not going to leave a stone unturned to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
she had everything that she needed to support her grandson. But we were, happy to be a part of that story. But yeah, I'm telling you, crazy things happen to
Mm-hmm.
people that every day. Every day.
You, and this is something I learned on in law enforcement. My chief actually told this to me. He said, you need to understand the optics of events, and not just the here and now.
Right.
And that is so huge because when a person is going through a traumatic experience, we want instant relief. And at sometimes the relief does come, but it's for that moment, and the optics of that issue come right back around because they didn't think about long term. And all I hear what hope+door does is say, listen, we want to help you, but we also want to help you for the long run. And looking down that road, what other assistance can we help you with? Is this, we want it to be one and done, but can we help you put this together and that together? We've already talked about how people can support hope+door, word of mouth, whether they know someone or just wanting to help. Is there any other ways that people can support hope+door?
Sure. I mean, look, we take contributions. We are a self-respecting nonprofit organization, right? So we
Okay.
live and die by contributions. I mean, most of our funding comes from the multifamily housing industry. So property managers,
Okay.
like I said, it's way cheaper to support us than it is to pay for eviction.
Right.
Make contributions. Many property managers are our supporters, as are what we call the supplier partners. Those would be the roofers and the flooring people and the fire suppression people. People like Lowe's and Home Depot are all, Sherwin-Williams, Mohawk Carpets are
Oh,
all
wow.
corporate sponsors of ours.
Wow.
So we, we'll give out all of the money that we have, right? We are a revolving door. Like I said, we're a revolving door of cash. If it comes in, we try and get it out the door as quickly as possible to people in the community who need it. And so look, if people want to make contributions, we're happy to have them. I always say no contribution is too small. We do something called Day of Hope around
Okay.
here. So our organization was founded by Dan and Steve Berger of Berger Communities. They are a mid-sized property management company based outside of Philadelphia, but they have properties in Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and Ohio. They really were looking for a way to give back to the community. So one of the things that the Berger staff does is that they have Day of Hope. They have a hope+door t-shirt. And if you want to wear it and dress down the last Friday of the month, you make a $5 contribution to hope+door.
Okay.
And then you get to dress down and basically wear matching clothes like everybody else in the office, right? But that stay at
Okay.
home.
Okay.
And you think about how much is my $5 really doing? But over the course of the
Okay.
year, the Burger staff donates about $15,000 to hope+door, which means that we're providing probably 5 families with rental support over the course of the year. So I always say you think it's not going to make a difference, but
Right.
all
But
of
it
those
does.
dollars really, really do add up.
Hands up.
So, look, does it mean we could really use more $50,000 donors? Absolutely. I'm not going to say
Absolutely.
no to
Right.
that, but
Exactly. Exactly.
we recognize that any individual contributions, we're always really, really happy to have them. And if anybody out there wants to host hope+door in their office with their family, they should totally let me know, because we would love to have you do that. It's a super fun way to, just get the word out
Okay.
there and to do something that's a little bit of team building and a little bit of good for the community.
For someone listening who's scared they might lose their home, again, you've already spoke about the process. Elaborate mentally or physically. What have you learned over the years that they should start the process
I'm
to
like,
handle it?
sometimes you just need to tell the first person, right? And whether it's somebody else who's living in your home, is just to sort of say out loud, hey, look, we're financially really potentially in trouble here, and our
Mhm.
housing is at risk, and we need to figure this out, right? Because when you're trying to do it all by yourself, that's really hard. And sometimes having another sounding board where somebody is just going to say to you for a couple days in a row, did you call hope+door? Did you call the county housing office? Did you at least tell the landlord that you were in this moment, right? I know
Okay.
in many ways, the last person you think you should tell that you're having trouble with your
Mhm.
rent is the person who you owe the rent to, right? Because you feel
Right.
like you should keep that to
Right.
yourself.
Right.
But sometimes, like, letting people know that there's this
But they need to
moment,
know.
they need to know.
They need to
And
know.
they also have resources, right? Most of the people
Mhm.
who work in apartment offices have had experience with other people, whether it's the current job or a previous job or an experience they've had themselves. And they might know of other stuff that's out there. And sometimes there are some communities that have little pots of money that,
Mhm.
they might have a little bit of discretionary money in the office that at least they can buy food
Mhm.
for the family to help them weather a little bit of the storm while they're buying another
Mhm.
week to figure stuff out. So
Mhm.
there are programs that some landlords have. There's a company called Flex that allows you to sort of split your
Okay.
rent payment, right? So if you get paid at an odd week during the year and out of the month and can't necessarily pay your rent in full the first of the month, Flex pays your rent in full on the first of the month, and for I think it's like a $20 fee, they'll allow you to pay
Mhm.
them back in like 2 or 3 installments over the rest of the month, right? To
Okay.
deal with cash flow.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know
Okay.
that their landlord's participating in a program like that. So sometimes
Mhm.
there's a little bit of help that's out there. Sometimes you just have to ask. And like, taking that first step is really hard, right? It's
Mhm.
hard to ask
Right.
for help. And there
Mhm.
are many resources that are online that you can look up from your phone that don't require you to
Mhm.
talk to anybody, right? So sometimes you
Right.
can
Right.
understand
Right.
what's out there, but you got to look, because
Mhm.
pretending that the problem is going to go away by itself, or that you're
Oh
just
no.
going to be able to
Yep.
muscle through, it doesn't happen. And,
Yep.
I think that, you and I both know the story well. When people who are injured
Mhm.
at work and get workers' comp, workers' comp will
Yeah.
cover 60% of your salary. It's really, you and I talked
Exactly.
about this earlier, right?
Yep.
Where,
Yep.
you know what, that's great, but does that mean that the supermarket's going to give you a 40%
Exactly.
discount, or the
Yep.
gas station's give you
No.
a 40%
Not at
discount?
all.
No. So,
Not at
right,
all.
here's this, this is a real problem. And if you
Mhm.
can see something like that happening and saying, okay, I got to figure something out, right? I got to give myself time to heal, right?
Mhm.
The workers' comp reality is the reality. As I said to you earlier, if you got injured 100% at work, they should be
Mhm.
paying you 100% to get
Right.
better, but
Right.
that is not the way the workers' comp universe works. And
Mhm.
so how are you going to fill in that gap, right? It's coming. What can you do as as a parent, as a person living on this planet, to recognize that you're going to be short. What can you do to shore that up, knowing that it's coming? And sometimes it's going online, doing a little research, asking some questions. We answered. I did not answer the phone when the person called in the middle of this podcast, but usually we answer the phone,
Yeah.
and
Got you.
we'll talk to whoever calls us, and people call us all day
Mhm.
long saying, "I know I don't
Mhm.
qualify for your program, but."
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Can you make a
Okay.
suggestion as to whatever?
Yes.
We are not
Yes.
alone
Yes.
in being a social service agency that does that. There are a lot of referral
Mhm.
organizations across the country that will help people navigate that, and will help you find that if you can't find it on your own. But that first thing, admitting to yourself that you might be in
Right.
financial trouble, is probably the very first thing you need to do.
Don't give up, because a lot of individuals out there, they are asking for help. They are believing that they're doing everything right, but the agency that they may be trying to receive that help from may be overworked and is just not getting done. And they shut down internally. And again, that's why it was so important to bring you and your team on our this podcast. See that they were working with shut them out, and and I don't want people to give up, and that's what Struggle to Success is about. It's about bringing people on who understand what struggle is, who understand, like, look, life is going to hit you, but don't give up. So definitely thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you for
it's
that.
really hard. I mean, I think that a lot of times, especially with government agencies, they have X amount of dollars, and once the dollars are
Mhm.
used up, they will take no
Yeah.
new applications. And it's really frustrating. And you're right, you
Yeah.
cannot give up, because there are other pockets of money. Sometimes finding them, they're hidden gems
Right.
out there,
Right.
but they are
Right.
out there. And you're right, do not give up. How are you going to stay focused on your stuff? Leave the
Mhm.
noise out here. How are you going to stay focused and really not to give up? That one last phone call that next phone call might be the thing that is going to help you turn the corner and give you the resources that you need. Like I said, people are disappointed when we can't help them, but we always say, hey, don't despair just yet, right? We're going to arm you with other tools, and we are not alone in. I like to say we're part of an army of people who are out there to provide support to people when they need it most. But really,
Mhm.
the key to resilience, I think, is just not giving up, right? And believing in yourself, and believing in the good that is your family. That's our responsibility
Yeah.
here. Is just one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. Stay focused. That's it.